Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever it is, wherever you might be. We had a few little issues this morning.
I can see that. Even now you're a little bit choppy, by the way, on the stream.
I don't know. Something doesn't seem right about all this today, but
I know.
I guess
You broke Restream.
we'll see how long it works. Telling how long no, how long it'll survive. Of course,
How's everyone? It's Friday. It's
might,
Friday.
might be as bad as last week where my where
Yes.
my VMs got deallocated. Maybe somebody at
Please tell
Restream's
me.
using maybe somebody at Restream is using is using spot instances.
They could be. They could be. I hope they don't.
Yep.
But God, it's Friday. How's the weather down there? It's miserable and raining up here in Seattle. How's the weather where
It
you
was
are,
hot.
Terrence?
It was hot yesterday here, but it's supposed to cool off. It's only going to be 80 today, so I'm
Just
still not
okay.
very excited about. Yeah,
Just
it was
80.
80. It was 87 yesterday.
God, 80 degrees.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yep. So yeah, it's too hot. I'm not a fan. So
There's a song about that.
about not being a
So
fan.
no, but it's getting hot in here. So if you're not an R&B fan,
Chingy.
hey,
What? Not that guy's name? Oh no, it was Nelly.
Nelly,
He always had a Band-Aid on his cheek.
he still has. I don't know. He maybe. So take off all your clothes. Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to say that on air, Bolt. But maybe I need
I
to pick
mean,
up my singing game now that we're making it big on TikTok.
Nelly. Well,
Nelly,
I don't even know if Nelly's still around.
he is
So
all around. Right? I mean, these
the
guys made their
is
millions back in the day, right?
sad part is I type it in on my Windows search and it shows me a local folder, which means there's a local folder somewhere that's got Nelly songs in it on my machine, which
Nice.
is embarrassing. Of course, when you
Yep.
search for Nelly on Google, the first thing that comes up is Nelly's Southern Kitchen in Belmont, North Carolina. Maybe that's a me thing, but I don't know.
Could
I don't
be.
know if Nelly's still around.
He was big in the early 2000s, late 90s.
Oh, he's only 5'8". Short.
Are you on his Wikipedia page?
No, that's what Google said or Bing or whatever this says. That's what it says.
Okay.
Anyway,
Okay.
enough about '90s rappers, I guess. So, how are you this morning, Christos?
I am good. I'm good. It's a fuzzy feeling this morning. Like it's the end of the week, but at the same time, I've got a million things to do. So my to-do list in my mind is growing by the minute.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff to do to end the week. It's Connect Week for us over here at Microsoft. Many people at Microsoft or across Microsoft are scrambling at the last minute to get perspectives and to find information about how they should submit their Connect. So a lot of
Annual
introspection,
annual review time.
annual review time.
Yeah.
No pressure,
So,
honestly. It defines everything for the rest of the year, or whether you'll have a job.
so do we have any news? Anything interesting going on? Out there
Spotify
in the
has
world.
uh, Spotify has revamped their UI. That's the only thing I have for today.
They have. Looks the same.
they,
What did they change?
I think they changed the my library, which was a dumpster fire every time you went to search for something. Like I added a podcast and I can't find where I added it. Like I followed the podcast, but I can't find it now. I can't even remember the name of the podcast, and I don't know where it is. Come on, Spotify,
Nice.
make it easy for me. It would be nice to have
I
a
didn't
category
think
of Spotify's, no, of
I
podcasts, for example.
I didn't think Spotify was. I didn't think that was like a thing though. I didn't think Spotify was big for podcasts. I thought that
It
was
is.
like. I thought most people used other stuff.
Well, did you not hear that Apple now is going to be? It's changed the model for podcasts, so it's going to be charging people for publishing, and therefore people will be looking for alternative ways to publish. I think Spotify was second biggest podcast hosting podcast. Yeah, a 4 to 5 show podcast. No, no, never thought
This
about
is
that.
it. You're
This is
listening to it right now.
this is it. Yeah, you're listening to us rambling while we're also have a camera on. I mean, who's gonna listen to us Like imagine JP struggling to get his OIDC client set up in his .NET app, and that being the subject of the podcast. I don't think so.
We're amazed that any of you listened to us in the first place, much less take us with you to watch later or listen later. So,
God.
anyway, no, we thought about doing one, but it's just going to be too much of a pain, just because there just aren't enough hours in the day. But if you're interested and if you want to do a one-off episode of something called the 425 Show Podcast, and you want to come talk to us about stuff, we'd be happy to host somebody.
Oh yeah. I mean, we've had episodes in the past where long time chatter, first time viewer. We had a lot of episodes in the past where we just had people coming to talk to us. We had Simon Brown, we had Claire Novotny, and we can get more people if you want us to. If you like this kind of format, in other words, let us know.
Yeah, we could do that. We could do more of those. The thing I don't like is one of the more popular phrases that we hear around here at work is fireside chats.
Oh God.
I can't stand the term because I don't even know what it means. I think it's an allusion to things that old people like used to listen, like when they would listen to the radio when some politician was talking during wartime, maybe like 400 years ago or whatever. Like when Winston Churchill would get on the radio and tell people that next to his fireplace that sacrifices were going to be required because they were going to go to wars. I don't know. But anyway, they say it all the time. And it's like, we're talking about software. We're not going to war. I don't need to have a fireside chat with somebody. Anyway. So I was thinking, I had some thoughts. I'm going to subject all of you to. So anyway, I had a buddy call me and we were talking about Kubernetes and containers and whatever. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing is, it's sort of like what dawned on me when we were talking is if you look at Windows, like 20, 25 years ago, right? Mm-hmm. Like back then you used to have to do a lot of work. You had to get your hands messy down there in the kernel and do all sorts of stuff for drivers and do all this work on your own. And it required you to do this really like super Windows specific stuff, right?
Yes.
But that was all you had, and so that was what you did. Well, so now we end up with cloud. We've got all these folks who are doing sort of like least common denominator or lowest common denominator, right? Mm-hmm. Well, Kubernetes runs on all the cloud, so I guess we'll use that.
Okay.
And it's sad because it's like you lose all of this amazing functionality you get everywhere else.
What kind of
higher level services? Okay, so let's take an app that I've got running in Kubernetes. Well, so it's running on a container that's sitting on a machine somewhere.
Yep. And
as part of a cluster. So it's sitting on a VM like it's 1997 all over again. And it's running on and it's managed, sure, whatever. And there are 900 sidecars that keep this piece of software chugging along, right? Yep. And it requires 4 million lines of YAML to deploy. Mm-hmm. And it's essentially a diff disk, right? I mean, it's an immutable image with a diff disk on top of it and bounded writes, right? So it's essentially what ATMs do. They have a gold image that sits on them, and then they write they do their little local writes to their own space. Mm-hmm. And then you can't use functions. You can't use stuff like app service. You can't. And it's like you lose all this sort of higher level stuff that makes you really a lot more productive. And it's all under this flag of, we can move it to another cloud. Which, I mean, how frequently do people really move clouds, right? Anyway, my point is that is like the Windows 3.1. Like that's how mature we are. How mature we are in cloud. Yeah. Because there's all this, it's just like, why would I want to spend that much time trying to make a bunch of containers do work when I could just go write software somewhere else and have it run? So anyway, my proposal is a shift. We move away from products and features specifically and say, well, I need Azure Function. I need Azure or an AWS Lambda, or I need this or I need that. Okay. And instead we shift to capabilities. And you say, well, I need a FIFO queue. I need a FIFO queue with no guaranteed ordering. And then whatever will fulfill that at runtime. So you start talking about like cross cloud and stuff, and that's what we really need. Is we need we need an abstraction based on capability.
Yeah.
So if I'm running in Azure, I get a storage queue. If I'm running in AWS, I get SQS. If I'm running on-prem, then go pull a RabbitMQ container or whatever.
Are we sure that this doesn't exist?
I've yet to see it. Because everything right now is all about just running, it's not capability based. You say, I want a Redis 16.2 image. Go pull that for me, please. And like you've got to do all the work. And instead, be much better, much easier, especially you start talking about like resiliency and stuff, right? Like storage goes down. Oh, well, storage quit working. Well, what other candidates do I have to fulfill this with? What other things match the capability set that Azure specific storage has that are available to me? Maybe there's AWS S3 is available.
For you. The engine will decide for you based on availability of services. Oh, I like it.
Availability of services. Think of it. It's like dependency injection for services. Apps.
Yeah.
Instead of it being like dependency injection for code, there's a contract. The contract can be fulfilled by any number of various things, and at runtime, the contracts are fulfilled. So it's like a DI container for services and apps, as opposed to for your code specifically.
Well, anyway, nice.
Yeah. So if you're interested in building it, let me know. And I don't know. I've started on this path about 4 times. I talked to some friends about this 2 years ago. They're like, "You're crazy. There's no way because you're gonna have to keep so many interfaces up to date." But I'm kind of the opinion now that like S3, right? Amazon S3, it's like the de facto standard for storage interfaces, right? Like all sorts of other services are S3 compatible because they expose the same API. And that just happened by virtue of AWS being sort of the de facto standard in cloud infrastructure, especially a few years ago. But I don't think it's not that far of a stretch to say, well, why don't we all sort of agree, at least Google, Microsoft, Amazon, I don't know if there are any other clouds that are actually of relevance anymore, but
Oracle,
just
IBM.
I know that you're in a 1994 mindset because we're going to do a bunch of .NET framework today, but
that could not describe it better, dude. IBM and Oracle, they are in the cloud space somewhere. I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, but they don't matter. I mean, I'm sure they matter to people who are going to run like Oracle software, like Oracle SaaS.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. I think Zoom uses Oracle Cloud because their bandwidth is so cheap. So I guess that's cool. IBM Cloud, I don't know. So there's a guy, he's like a cloud economist or whatever. He goes and runs a bunch of stuff, and he writes a bunch of stuff about capital, basically CapEx, and how much CapEx will determine sort of the cloud wars going forward. And 3 companies spend a ton of capital on infrastructure improvement and infrastructure itself to grow their clouds. 3 of them do. And the 3 of them have a strong correlation with the 3 that are the most successful. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's it's correlation, not causation, but it certainly seems like you got to spend money to make money. Anyway, but I don't know. I think it'd be really nice because nobody if you're brand new to a cloud today, if you're just coming to start with a cloud today. Look, where do you even begin? There are 9 million products in all of these clouds with 1 billion features across them, right?
Yep.
How do you know what kind of queue you should use? How do you know what kind of disk you should use? How do you know what kind of storage account you should create, right? What's the difference between hierarchical storage and SSD storage and ultra SSD? Like, you got to learn all this stuff to even know what you should actually start to build. Whereas instead, it'd be great to say, well, look, I need 25,000 IOPS. Just give those to me and give them to me on an SMB interface. And then then we go figure out what fulfills that contract. And then if you're on-prem, it could be your SAN, your NAS, your whatever, your DAS. If you're in a cloud, there's some combination of disk striping and certain account types and blah, blah, blah that'll give you your 25K IOPS, and here's the SMB endpoint for it. Go forth.
Are you expecting this platform to also provision these things for you?
Sure, why not? Might as well. If it knows if it's going to pick candidates, it might as well deploy them too. That's all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
I was going to say that's what cloud architects are. Caparino GR is right. I mean, there is a specific role in many companies these days where they hire for a cloud solutions architect, and the whole point is for them to make the educated decisions, so the rest of the team can focus on building software. I'm not sure that software will solve that problem. I'm not saying that it can't, but I think you're trying to find a solution to a problem, or you have a solution to a problem that doesn't exist, more or less. I mean, it exists, but there's a solution right now, right? It's a cloud architect that comes in and says, this is what you need to use if you're running on AWS, and this is what you need to use if you're running on Azure, and they are certified and they do the whole thing. Cloud solution engineer and SREs will be happy with what JP by JP taking their jobs off them.
I mean, hey, look. I've done cloud architecture work for 10 years.
Yes.
I did consulting before I came to Microsoft. I did commercial software and then came to Microsoft. I was a cloud solution architect here for 4 years. I mean, I totally get what I guess the end result of it is, but I want to write code that does stuff. It's Power Apps for pro devs, right?
Oh, be careful what you ask there.
Let me start to put stuff together. And I don't really need to know how you fulfill the thing. I just need to know that it's been fulfilled. And I'm not saying there's not plenty of room for humans, but there's also plenty of room to correct human problems too.
Yes.
And not to mention, systems like that are going to be a reflection of the people who build them anyway, right?
True.
And so,
True.
there's still people that are going to be there. I'm just saying that if I'm a developer and I need to get work done, writing 9 million lines of YAML and figuring out what I have to do to make things work, it's a waste of time.
But if I make it XML, will you be happy?
No. I don't care what language you do it in.
I know.
You can write it in any language you want to. You could, however you need to express that is fine. You could express it in YAML. I don't really care. It doesn't matter how you express it. My point is that there's benefit to automation, and that right now the automation we have is fairly crude in the sense that you are automating human tasks. You're not automating human intelligence, I guess.
Yeah.
Human decisions.
Yeah,
and I think there's an opportunity
to make educated decisions about what you're going to use. What you're saying is, I would love for something to make the decision for me, so I can just build on it, and then have also an abstracted interface that
I'd like for something that says, hey, I think, I've got high confidence that these are good things and you should do them. And maybe that's correct. And maybe it's not. Like, maybe they're totally off base and totally wrong.
Yeah.
But,
No, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just agreeing on your thought there.
Nobody's going to get rid of a cloud solution architect because we're going to need them as long as we have cloud stuff. But, my point is,
BST says
let's do less.
He's tried to look into what you're saying before. I suspect that it's either a very complex, very expensive piece of software, or it doesn't exist yet.
Y'all are just naysayers.
Yeah. Caparino is asking, we have a couple of questions. One is, what is a reliable way of storing edge transactions for subsequent cloud syncing? I suspect by edge, I think it's like IoT. So do we have IoT Edge and IoT Hub to address that? Is that the way to go, JP? I haven't done much with IoT, so.
If it is edge stuff, like if it's IoT devices and they're occasionally disconnected or whatever, IoT Edge is one way to do it, which is essentially it's just a set of containers that runs on Linux. There were some older things in like the mobile app service stuff, but I don't think any of that's been maintained of late. I think it's all pretty old.
Adrian is working on that.
Huh?
Adrian Hall.
For now at least.
For now, yes.
There was the mobile backend as a service stuff, like the Azure mobile apps, and it had like some sync framework, but I mean that was 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, it was put on ice, but I think it's coming back. But it all depends on your scenarios. What kind of transactions are you dealing with, and what is your hardware, software setup, I would say.
Yeah. So anyway, I think, IoT Edge is good if you're talking about edge devices, or if you're talking about something that's like something that's going to connect occasionally, or if you want to batch things before they go out. IoT Edge is pretty cool for that, because the messages essentially accrue at the edge device, and then based on rules, they get blasted out to other things. So you may have a rule that you do some local processing on all the messages, but you may only send up the aggregates, or you may only send up one point. Like you may do sampling and only send up 10% of the overall messages or something. So so there are lots of different things. Just depends on what the scenario is. So
Okay. And the other question. Let us know if that answers your question. Prick Inge. Prick Inge? I don't know. Park Inge. I don't know how to pronounce these funky names on. Man, I'm struggling with this. I'm too old. Caparino is asking, what is Bicep? And Bicep is infrastructure as code. So Bicep is our programming language around ARM. And I think Bicep is to ARM what TypeScript is to JavaScript, but at a higher level of abstraction. So no, Bicep is not an alternative to YAML. Bicep is something that compiles down to ARM, and you can reverse engineer ARM into Bicep, and you can compile Bicep into ARM. Terraform, it's like Terraform, right? It's a different way for expressing infrastructure, but the nice thing about Bicep is that it is natively compatible or natively supported by Azure CLI and Azure Cloud Shell and PowerShell. So PowerShell can now call into Bicep directly without really needing to compile anything, and we'll do the compilation and the deployment for you. So it's an easier way writing ARM, more or less.
It's a DSL.
It's a DSL. Yes, thank you.
Domain specific language. Yeah,
that's the word I was looking for. It's a DSL, but it's only for Azure. So Bicep does not work for other cloud providers like Terraform does, for example. So you have an option of tools, and you have Pulumi as well, which is another option if you want to do DSL stuff and infrastructure as code. We had a couple of people that came to do Terraform and Pulumi on the show. So yeah.
I hear people call it Terraform, which makes me laugh. Like terror with an R. Terraform.
Oh, Terraform.
I don't like it. Yeah, it's kind of funny. All right. So are you ready to get your cargo shorts on and go digging in the desert for .NET framework stuff?
If I need to change clothes, I need to go and change now, right?
I mean, you were singing that.
I came prepared.
You were singing Nelly earlier, so anything's possible right now, right?
Anything is possible. No, we're ready to go back into 2005 and do some fun stuff. Let's time travel.
Okay, so if you were with us last week or earlier this week, Tuesday, you may have remembered that that our VM quit working right before we left, and that's because I was using an Azure Spot instance. And Azure Spot instances are awesome because Spot instances let you essentially buy unused capacity. So this is a VM we're using today. It's grown since last time. So it's a 48 core, 200 gig of memory machine.
Do you have enough RAM there? Do you have enough RAM?
Maybe I could maybe run Teams and Chrome at the same time. Right?
Yes, and
Visual Studio. So we've got 48 CPUs and 192 gigs of RAM. Here's the thing about this. This machine is 31 cents or something an hour.
Damn.
Which is like a couple $100. If it was to run all month. So anyway, the Spot thing. So what happened last week was, or earlier this week, the Spot instances I was using were, I guess, in high demand, and so they got evicted. Actually, got evicted like 3 more times that afternoon.
Oh, really?
So I was like, well, let me move to something with a low eviction rate.
Yeah.
And so I moved. This one was huge, and I was like, oh, that's perfect. And so this is what we're going to use is our 48 core, 192 gig of memory machine. That's what we're going to use for Visual Studio today. So I don't know, maybe it'll be a little bit faster. So, and if we look at it, sure enough, 48 virtual processors. So yeah, not a bad deal. Not a bad deal. So yeah, okay. Anyway, of course, we don't have 64-bit Visual Studio yet because the 2022 preview isn't out yet. So
yes, exciting times. Daryl Challenger says, as of last year, eBay didn't have a .NET Core compatible library. I mean, I'm not surprised about eBay, man. These guys are, I don't know, they have their own thing, right? They're doing it their own way. Umbraco, I think Umbraco runs on Core, doesn't it? I will be super surprised if Umbraco does not run on Core. I remember 2 or 3 years ago, the team was working on the Core version of Umbraco. Are you sure that doesn't have .NET Core? I mean, you might know it better. I haven't done anything with Umbraco recently, but I am surprised now that you said Umbraco doesn't. But the point there is that not every company will be able to provide a .NET Core library. Although it's been 6 years since we released this baby, it's fine. Oh, beta. It's in beta. Okay. Yeah.
Oh no, yep, they've got a. So they announced some. They've got like a migration. Looks like they're doing a migration, so it's cool. Yeah, it's cool. No, I mean nothing against .NET Framework. There's lots of stuff that is still written in it. There's lots of stuff that still exists, and there's lots of stuff that will always be .NET Framework.
Mm-hmm.
So, which is exactly why we're getting into what we're getting into today. Now, there is. Make sure you join our Discord. There's been a bunch of really neat conversation out there this morning, talking about B2C and talking about old .NET Framework apps and making them work with B2C, because things like the B2C login URL are going to be changing, and how does that work for compatibility and all that sort of stuff. So make sure you join us out there on Discord and come hang out and get your identity questions answered and just meet a bunch of super cool people, right?
Yeah. And make sure to sign up on our YouTube channel so you don't miss any updates when we stitch and make our videos more appealing and easier to consume, rather than hearing us talk about, I don't know, .NET and complaining like two old men.
I see that Perkinj
Yes.
had some questions. So
The runtime apparently is free, right?
I will put this link in here. So yeah, so that link in the chat in the developer side, that's for deploying an IoT Edge module. So you can use like a VM, you can use a Raspberry Pi. Like there are basically anything you've got, you can run to, at least for testing and development for building these containers that are going to run on Core or on IoT Edge. So you can get started with it for free. So. Okay, so let's get back into our code. So last time we were here on Tuesday, we did a few things to take this older app. This is the sample from 2014 that uses .NET Framework, .NET Full Framework,
the
full fat .NET Framework. It uses full fat .NET Framework, signs the user in, and it gets a token to go call an API.
Yep.
And so if you remember from last week, we had to make a few changes. So we did have a few changes in here. Like we made our MSAL builder static class, which just kind of made this a little bit easier because we had a bunch of extra stuff. And then we also had some problems with HTTP context. And the big problem with HTTP context was that the context itself was null.
Yep.
When we came back from Azure ADs, when we tried to redeem that code, the HTTP context was null. And so because of that, we were having some issues for it. So I did do a little poking around after the show last week and found that in OWYN, we do have a context that we can get, and it's out of the application instance.
Very nice.
Now, supposedly the reason why some of this happens is that there could be like there could be like a thread context problem that's going on because we've got this async event that's happening, and so the context isn't available here, but it is available over here. At any rate, rather than trying to completely fix this whole thing, I thought, well, let's just go get the context out ourselves and then go and run from there. So that's what we're doing, is we're getting the HTTP context out of this OWYN context, and this, of course, is after the authorization code has been received. This way we can redeem it for a token, which is what we're doing here with MSAL. We had a couple other things that we updated, and we updated the vast majority of these. So we'll start over here at the user profile controller. Or actually, let me go back over to the naive session cache. So the one thing we did also add to the naive session cache was we're going to pass the context back in, and that'll be
pass the context after all, right? Because it didn't have awareness of that. Okay.
So however we can get a context, we're going to pass it back in.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've just got essentially two methods in here. We've got a load and we've got a persist.
Yeah.
And those are called by MSAL as you're doing work. So
Yes.
it's a little bit different from ADAL, but much less code compared to ADAL. When you're looking at in terms of what you have to own and manage and understand and maintain.
Yes.
So our naive session cache is just going to store these literally in session. All session is an in proc session. So you notice we have a session here, session state, and it's just in proc. So as soon as we recycle the app pool, stop the app, scale out to a different machine, like none of that's going to be there. So it's not terribly useful, except for dev. Because if you're in a cloud environment where you might run on multiple nodes, that's not going to stay in sync.
Yeah, please don't screw up your sessions.
Yeah, so you can either run this on one really big server, or you can use something like SQL or Redis or whatever as an out of band state provider, session provider, and then you'll be okay.
Jay Taliadoro is asking whether the code that we're writing here only applies to Azure AD, or will it be applicable for B2C? It will be applicable to B2C. Most of the code is there. It's just the authority and the endpoints that will change in your settings.
So most of it will be, there will be some configuration changes. There will also be a few things like graph isn't accessible for B2C users, so we have to take some of this out. But we had intended on doing this with B2C as well.
Yes.
And depending on how far we get today, we could even try to do that today before we bounce, because we do still have 80-ish minutes. So yeah, probably maybe we should see this running here in a few minutes, and then we'll try to swap it out for B2C and see where we go, and then we'll go look at the API. So we've got an in-proc session state that we're using for our token cache, and you don't even necessarily have to use session state. You could also use your own state provider, because again, all you're doing in the session cache is persisting and retrieving. So it doesn't have to be connected to like ASP.NET session cache or any of that sort of stuff.
So if you don't want to. Using Redis, for example, here, right? Or some storage like SQL or something else, correct?
You could do it on your own, or you could do it through session state if you wanted to use session state to do it.
Yep.
Okay. So you
had to fix this one, right? For the session state, you had to make it in proc because it wasn't working before, correct?
Yeah, like it was interesting. I don't know what the default is if you don't give it a mode, but there was no mode before, and the session was essentially null all the time. So by setting this to in proc, of course, we had a configured one. I don't know what the default is, but it almost seemed as though the default was like a no op. So I don't know.
Yeah,
it was very strange, but at any rate, we're going to use in proc because we're just going to use it while we're running today. For dev, that's fine. So the two places where we are using MSAL, one was in the user profile controller. And so this one goes and handles getting the user's data out of graph and then showing that on the screen. So there were kind of two main things we have to do. So we've got to do this MSAL acquire token silent, which is what we have to do to get our token. And we need the user's object ID. And so the object ID is their object identifier. We're mostly using that for the cache. So the cache key is the user's object ID. The user's object ID will always be the same, provided you request the profile scope. So the object ID will always be the same for a user across all apps. The subject claim will not, but the object ID will be. So we're going to use the object ID as the cache key. And then we're also going to get the user's UPN. And there's a reason for this. We need the UPN as the hint for which user do we get out of the cache.
Oh, I see.
So even though the cache is per user, because it's in session, even though the cache is per user, we still need to tell MSAL, give me the cache tokens for user X.
Yes.
And there are two ways we can do that. One is with the user's actual identifier, which their identifier today is object ID dot tenant ID.
Right.
So but that is not guaranteed. So we could use this because we know that's the format today, but we aren't guaranteed that's always going to be the format. So we'd have to round trip it. Now we can get that identifier value out, but we can't get the identifier value out of MSAL until, of course, it's gone into MSAL. So it's somewhat of a chicken and egg a chicken and egg kind of a thing. So instead, we can use the user's UPN. And because the UPN came from Azure AD and because it's been set here, then we can use the UPN. And the UPN should be reliable. I did have some extra code in here. You'll notice that's commented out where I was specifically trying to build the account and add it to the claim set. But I'm not. The order of operations, I don't think, is exactly in the correct order, and so we'll have to dig in a little bit deeper to do that.
So what you have right now should work with a UPN, and we don't have to.
So what we have now is with the UPN, and so that's what we're doing here. Is saying, give me a token for graph,
for that
and here's the user's UPN. Yep. And then here's the user's UPN.
Okay.
So, and again, because we're using a user specific cache, the user should be the only one in there. And so, but this is the pattern that's used. And so this is what we have to,
scroll down a little bit. What happens on the try catch, on the catch? Are we expecting an exception for, so the user does not have a token. And we have to go and do an interactive one, right?
So if the user doesn't have a token, we just send them back down the regular OAuth pipe to go get the, So all we're going to do if we can't get a token out of the cache is essentially force them to re-authenticate, because by re-authenticating, they'll be getting we can essentially rehydrate the cache, is what it comes down to.
Right.
And then this whole, I guess there's some code in here if there's a reauth, then that is what triggers it to do it. So there's a link that gets generated in here. But at any rate, if there's no token in the cache, we essentially have to go have the user sign in again. They won't necessarily sign in again in the sense that they may not type in their username and password again, but they have to go back. They have to go back to the well. And if the well knows who they are, then they won't have to type in credentials. But the app will get a fresh token. So if it errors, it just shows an authorization required thing here. So that's it. So this one, most of the graph call didn't change. The only thing we added, or the only thing that would change, of course, is the access token gets set here, and this is for calling graph to get the user's data, and then it just takes the user profile data and stuffs it into certain places and makes it show up on the screen. So nothing too crazy.
So we can run it.
We can run this one.
Let's run this bad boy and see what happens.
I guess we have to run it with IS Express, don't we?
I don't think you have a choice there. Run it with Kestrel and see what happens. Oh, by the way, did you hear there's a new tool or there's a new extension for VS Code that more or less mimics what we used to do with Postman, like a full-blown
that's cool.
Tool. I'll find the link while you do that, because I thought, you know what? If I can take it with me, I don't have to install Postman every single time I need to use it, then that's perfect.
So let's go ahead and sign in. And we went over to Azure AD. We signed in, and there we are. So I'm already signed into this browser, so I didn't have to actually sign in again. But if we were to do this in, say, a private window, if we go to localhost 44322, when we open this and sign in, we're going to go over to Azure AD where I'm going to have to sign in. So I'm going to sign in with my account. I'm going to get prompted for multi-factor on my phone, which we'll do that here. And now it's going to ask me if I want to get signed in, and then we'll go back to the app. And now we're back in the app, and it knows who I am. And if we go look at my profile, we should see profile data, and we didn't have to re-sign in because we already had our graph data, which was great. So we got our display name, our first name, last name. This is the stuff that came out, right?
Look at that.
So now the other bit of code that we have yet to touch is the ToDoList code that calls an API.
Correct.
So this is saying that a sign-in is required, which is chances are is because we and I haven't touched that code yet, but I'm going to try to sign in.
You're not looking at the right place in the cache, or you're not using the cache, right? Oh no, we need to get the access token, don't we? For the API, which we haven't configured. Have we even configured?
Yeah, so we have to get an access token for the other API, which is going to be different. So that's going to require a little bit of extra work. So we know our user profile container is good. That means that this chunk of code here that we have is ready to go, is working well. So we can get rid of our to-do now. So we don't have this to do anymore.
Do you have
I
any
don't
other
actually
to-dos
think
with ADAL?
I do. We've got the to do for let's see. I forgot how you see to dos task list. Where's my task list? Here we go. So we've got ADAL here. So this is
Sign
in the
off.
okay. So this is in the account controller. Oh, and we've already updated that. So that's good.
Perfect.
Actually, let's leave these in here now that I think about it because
Oh, so people can see where we change things?
yeah.
Nice.
Or I guess we could always leave something else since it's no longer a to do. But at any rate, yeah, we'll leave them in there so that when we publish this code later today, you can go see exactly where we made the changes. So, or you can just watch the video again, I guess. Okay, so anyway, I'm going to take this and I'm just going to copy this little snippet and we're going to take this snippet with us. Looks like we do need tenant ID a little bit later on. Because we're encoding the tenant URL. That's right, or the tenant ID. We're going to take this little snippet of code because we are going to need this. We're going to make it. Yeah, we're going to make a little small change. But one thing to notice: this is the user profile controller where we're going to call graph. This is our list of scopes, and you'll notice it says graph resource ID .default. And so we're saying give us an access token specifically. Give us an access token specifically for graph.
Yeah.
So let's go look at our to-do list code. Now this code has two methods. One is going to show us our to-dos, and the other one is going to let us write a to-do.
Yep.
So here's our first to-do. We'll just put this in here. Now what we have to change is our to-do list resource ID.
Yes.
Is what we're going to be using here instead.
Yep.
And because we're doing an acquire token silent, there's a really good possibility, because we've yet to get a token for our to-do list. We have one for graph, but we don't have one for to-do list. It's a good possibility that this is going to blow up. That means that when we send a reauthorization or reauthentication request, we need to also say, give this user tokens for this specific resource for the to-do list rather than for the graph.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that in a minute. So now we go and retrieve the user's to-do list. All that should be pretty straightforward, and then it just deserializes them, and so whatever, no big deal. But however, if we hit here, then we're going to get an unauthorized if it says the status code, and then it's just going to say that it's wrong. We're going to also catch the exception because this thing is going to throw an exception that says it's going to throw an exception that says you don't have it. And we have to do something with it. So, pretty similar to the other one. And so let's see here. So then we've also got pretty much the same code right here to do the same thing, which is to go get one for the to-do list resource ID. And then we need to pass the UPN as we did before, which means we need to get to UPN. I'm just going to go copy this again.
AJ Wildfire's in the house. He's a little bit upset that we have ads. And there are no ads. I don't know where you're seeing the ads.
What are you talking about?
I think the first time that you join the stream, it will show you an ad. But that is Twitch, not us. We don't make money out of that. It's Twitch making money. So don't blame us. I mean, we're not playing an ad right halfway through the stream, are we?
Well, they said Twitch said they were like thinking about that or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So
time to move to
speaking of ads, what's that thing that you just put in the developer chat? What is all that? 10-month subscriber? What is all that?
I don't know. I used the stream elements thing. Yeah, I copy pasted the stuff we had on the stream elements, and it's weird.
Anyway, okay. So we got our to-do list controller. So let's go see. Let's just go see what it does.
Yep. What does it
We'll run this again. So we've updated our thing to go. So we know it's going to get the right cache. It's going to use the UPN of the user to find to do the right thing. So let's go see. So we'll get signed in. So I'm signed in. Should see my name. There we go. If we go to my profile, we should see my profile, which came from Graph. Great. Now if we go to to-do list, what do we get? So to-do list is saying, hey, you've got to sign in. So you're saying you got to sign in to see your list. So let's click sign in. Let's see. I have no idea what this is going to do. Is really what it
Yeah,
comes
it's
down
a
to.
little bit unorthodox, I would say, but not unorthodox, but slightly annoying that we can't do it silently, right? What does it do? To do list. Oh, there you go.
So we're going to go back, and now we're
Yes.
being reauthorized, and now it looks like we are in a redirect loop, which makes
Oh,
sense
it
because
makes.
the redirect loop is well, it's because I think we're not getting the token for the correct scope. Is what it comes down
Ah,
to.
have we configured that even in the app?
So we did change the scope that we needed,
Mm-hmm.
but if we look at the request that's being sent over, let's see, we're doing an authorize on client ID with a redirect URI, response
Mm-hmm.
type code, and let's see, response mode, da 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 da. So what we need in here is it looks like we're missing the scope entirely.
Oh.
So let's see. In order to do that, we are probably going to have to change the authentication properties to add a scope.
Well, scroll up a little bit. Line 95 or something. There's 101 on authorization code received. It has a graph resource ID default there, line 101. Is that what's causing the
Yep. So
problem?
this is well, no, not entirely. So this is part of it, but we're
Mm-hmm.
gonna we also need to send that over. We need to send that over in the scope. So in our to-do list controller, where is our reauth thing that's happening? Let's see. Here's our reauth. So when we do the challenge, the thing we're going to have to change is we need to change the scope, essentially.
Okay.
So in the authentication properties, I
That's a
believe
dictionary, but what is the dictionary?
here is where I believe we can edit the scope. Let's see. So we need a new, I guess this has to be a dictionary.
It's
So,
a dictionary, yeah.
or it's expecting us to pass in a dictionary.
So you can do a new over there, right?
Well, let's see. What is this? It's an authentication properties. So I wonder if we have an initializer. So let's see. We get an allow refresh, a dictionary, expires, is persistent, issued, and redirect URI.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think any of those are going to be useful. So instead, we're going to have to, let's see, what's our other parameter here? Authentication types. I think what we may end up having to do is we may end up having to.
Yep.
I think we may have to change. We may have to hook into a couple of additional OpenID events. Additional arbitrary values which may be used by a particular authentication type. So yeah, so we'll essentially get these properties, and then in our event is where we'll have to go and add them, right?
Okay.
I think that's going to be our route forward. So if we gave this thing an arbitrary dictionary, so let's see, a new dictionary. What kind of dictionary was it, or what kind of dictionary was it expecting? String. All right. String.
Apparently, somebody put a whole Pluralsight course today about string management in C#.
About what?
String management in C#. And I'm like,
String management.
How can you have a whole Pluralsight course on strings alone? Is this something I'm missing out that much? It's like, is this something magic for strings that I didn't know in the 19 years I've been working with? Like, it makes me doubt my knowledge on strings. You know what I mean? Like, what is in this course that I have to go and look at it for 2 hours? Now I'm curious. I need to go and look at it. But what the hell is in there?
I had an interview years and years ago, and the guy absolutely took me to task on string allocations.
Oh, dun, dun, dun.
So I don't know. I mean,
or stack and all that jazz.
mm-hmm. Yeah, it was pretty painful.
I love
And
it.
like I guess he was really really into strings. Maybe it's his Pluralsight course. I don't know. He was
Uh,
really really into them.
let's exchange notes behind after the show. So I'm really curious to see it could be the same person. Although this person, I know him from events, and he's really young. So I doubt it was that person that was interviewing you.
No, this guy was this. I mean, he wasn't. He was probably in his 40s. Be my guess.
Nope, that's not the one then.
So okay. So in our to-do list controller, in our exception, we're just going to add. I mean, this is essentially, we could call it something like scope to be requested or whatever. I mean, it doesn't really matter. Scope needed, maybe we'll call it. I'll call it that. Because we're not actually going to set the authentication property here, I don't believe. Instead, we're going to have to we're going to have to add a new event, listen on the event, and then modify it on redirect to identity provider. So here we're going to catch it. We're going to set our string that says, hey, we need the to-do list. We need a token for to-do list. So back in auth, we're going to have a new one called, I believe it's on redirect to identity provider. There we go. And that will be, in here, we should have our dictionary, which we'll have to go look and see how to get our values out of that dictionary. So on redirect to identity provider.
Yep.
On the redirect to identity provider. Well, hang on. Let me think this through all the way.
Yeah, think about it.
Because when we run this, so we're using MSAL, but we're using old ASP.NET. So that means we're using V1 endpoints, which we should probably adapt. We don't want to use V1 because we have to use resources instead of scopes for V1.
Yeah.
Which we don't want to do either. So did we make that change in here? I don't think so. So we've got our AAD instance. So we do need to change this to be V2. So let's go ahead and change this to V2.0. So we're going to add that to our instance. And then we should be able to send scopes without any drama. So then in here, when we do our options here, I believe, is this our dictionary? No, this is not. So in here, we can add our scope. And this at one point was read only. I don't think it is. No, it's got a getter and a setter, so that's good. So essentially what we'll do is we need to figure out where our options went, and then we're going to set our scope. So in the message, maybe it's in state? No.
Is there anything in the docs that we can look at?
Yeah, let's go see. In fact, there's a bunch of stuff that we had to use this with for B2C. So let's go look at redirect to identity provider and ON. Okay. Oh, there's a book.
Our book?
It's at the Microsoft Press store.
Wow.
So let's see. Redirect to identity provider. Really just looking for like a good sample of it. Let's see here. Let's see. Redirect to identity provider, ON, add scope. Well, maybe the ON.
The book will tell you.
Maybe it's not a book. Maybe it's just an article. Hey, look, it is just an article. Ooh. Cool, and it's from the right time period, 2016.
Just at the edge of .NET Core taking over the .NET world.
Well, we had so many, there's so many, names are so similar from one to the other that you want to make sure you're in the right spot, you know. So that's, okay, so we don't need this. Request options. I don't think. Here we go. Here are notifications. That is not a useful notification. So redirect to identity provider. That's going to be the first thing. That's going to be the outbound response. That's when we need to make our changes, right? So here we go. Redirect to identity provider. So this gives us, in our context, we've got the host, we've got the path base, we've got redirect URI and post logout. So we're essentially we're setting things.
Nothing about scopes there.
Well, so we may be able to do a protocol message. That's prompt, which we don't need to worry about that. So I wonder if that is in protocol. I wonder if we have scope in protocol message, however. Scope. Yeah.
Oh, nice. See, documentation sometimes helps. Sometimes.
Well, now the scope. Now we also need to figure out where are the authentication properties that we set. Where do we get those?
So Antonati is asking. So basically, we're just trying to access the needed scope from the challenge.
Pretty much. Yep.
Yes.
So before we send it out, we want to update it to include the scopes, essentially. So where are those authentication properties in that? So let's see. This is redirect to identity provider, which is a redirect to identity provider notification. So let's see what we can find about that object. See if we can find some WS Federation authentication module. Nice.
The good old days. Next week, we're doing WCF. No, I'm just kidding. It was like, no, I'm quitting. That's it.
Let's see. So redirect to identity provider. Let's see. I think it's an authentication properties. That's what we set. Where can we get that? Look at this. Top
Stack
answer.
Overflow. Is that your question?
Overflow. Yeah. I hope not. Been trying to figure it out for 7 years and still haven't figured it out. Or 4 years and 10 months. Sorry.
10 months. Almost 5 years. What happened to Fox Pro? Oh, that's already installed and running somewhere in one of JP's VMs. Don't worry about it. It's out of sight, out of mind.
We need to run Fox Pro like in DOSBox or something. Okay. So on redirect to identity provider. So this has, let's see, the notification O in context, authentication. Okay. Authentication response, revoke authentication. Okay, so this is looking for the authentication types. And then we've got the issuer. So that doesn't matter. So authentication response challenge properties. Boom. There we go. That's what we're looking for. Although this is in the question, not in the answer, so maybe I should read a little bit more, but whatever.
Were there not stats out there like people will copy from their own place, or sometimes not even the accepted answer on Stack Overflow because they think it's the right thing?
The thing I remember, I had this one really bizarre bug on my machine, and every time I would search for it, it would take me to the server fault question where I answered, where I asked the question.
Yeah.
And nobody was helpful. They said, "This isn't a place for your workstation. We deal with servers here." I'm like, "All right, whatever, man." Like, all right, keep making those lights blink, pal. Leave me alone. Sorry, I intruded.
You need to run server. Sorry, JP. If you're not running server software, then you're not allowed to ask any questions.
Yeah, it was pretty. It was pretty weird.
Okay.
So I honestly, I didn't feel like it. So in our authentication properties, we've got our dictionary, great, and in our dictionary, let's do a try get value on needed scope, and then scope. Okay, and then what we'll do here is we will set the scope to the. Well, we could probably get a little bit more creative with it, because I suppose it's also possible
that it's not there.
Also, there's certainly going to be a case where the needed scope doesn't exist. Absolutely, definitely going to be. That's going to be one case. Is
Yep.
we didn't send this.
Mm-hmm.
The other case would be where because like sign in and stuff is that this is still going to get hit on all of those.
Yep.
So the other case would be potentially you've got one controller that's trying to do graph and to-do list or whatever at the same time, and so you have to deal with it. And so you wouldn't want to necessarily replace certain scopes, but you may want to replace resource-based scopes if you get what I mean. Okay, so we're going to take the needed scope. This is probably not the most ideal, but and then we'll just return task from result. And okay, cool. This should give us our needed scope, which means that in our next round trip, when we need this, we should have that scope tacked on.
Okay.
And should be good to go. So, okay, all right. So let's see. We also did the cardinal sin if we made two big changes at once, and that we've added this response, and we also switched to v2.0, but we'll come back around to that. So, all right, so we need to make sure we're signed out, which we are. Good. There are no cookies or anything. I'm going to open up the network pane just so we can see what's happening, because I have a suspicion we're going to have to open it anyway. So let's go to sign in. Sign in, authorize. Cool. So our authorization worked. It doesn't have my name, which is interesting. We'll come back to that one too.
V2.
V2. Yep. So let's go to my profile. So profile. So we're still missing our UPN because our claims principal we didn't map after changing to V2. So yeah, because the claims that have been issued are going to be a little bit different this time around. So we'll see. Should we back out from V2 and replace? Well, because we can't make a scope though.
Fix it. Where are we setting the claims principal? Where are we mapping it?
It's got to be somewhere here in startup. Let's see.
Easy Wildfire, we'll get you your DID session, man. We need to get Matthias on the stream at some point. I don't know how quickly you need it, but I think in the next few weeks we'll have Matthias coming on the stream to talk about DID.
So let's see. We're going to have to do our own claims mappings because this is all old stuff. Blah.
So do you think the V2 change is going to be too much?
Oh, we're going to go back to it. We'll come back to it. I don't want to leave it out, but I don't want it to be.
Yes.
I don't want us to be bifurcated here
exactly.
between the two.
Let's see if we can make it work, and then if it works with that, then we can move to V2, I guess. I forgot we're using V1.
All right, so we're going to sign in. I'm going to open up my side thing here. Check to make sure our profile's still good. Profile's still good, so we're still getting code. We're still getting tokens. That's great. Let's go to our to-do list. To-do list.
Thinking about it.
So to-do list so essentially it tried to get to the cache. The cache doesn't have a thing for to-do list, so we're getting this error, so that's fine. So let's click here to sign in.
So you put a breakpoint on your middleware somewhere so you can see what's happening? Or do you have that much confidence in your code that it will...
I don't have any confidence in the code.
Oh, there's a redirect loop again.
Yep. So let's see. So there are the OpenID authentication properties. So that's cool. Okay. All right. So what we need to add, I believe, is not going to be scope, but more a parameter called resource.
Oh, V1. Yes.
So because that's going to be a generic one. So let's try this instead. Let's do parameters, or sorry.
Protocol message and resource. Or is it parameters?
Resources in here. What do you know?
There you go.
And then we'll just do scope. Resource.
Why is it underlined? Is it deprecated?
Because it's still running.
Oh, okay.
I didn't stop debugging.
Oh, the good old days. Edit and continue.
That also means that our needed scope is probably misnamed, but that's okay. We'll come back to that. And we don't need default, so we'll take that out. All right, let's run this again. You want to put a breakpoint in here?
Yeah, I was thinking in there just to capture what is in there, and then
Okay.
we don't have
So
to
let's get signed in. So this is what's happening, of course, the first time, and we don't have anything in that property, so we're just going to exit and get redirected, which is fine. If we go to profile, we've got our graph token because we requested our graph token up front. If we go to ToDoList, we're going to bomb.
Yep.
Well, we're going to throw an exception. It's going to get
It's
caught.
taking this long to load the page, by the way. I mean, it's a round trip to Azure AD and then just bombs. It's not even that, right?
It's not a round trip.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So let's see. We got our. Let's see. Did we get a scope? Oh. Okay.
It says, Daryl Sansa says you have needed scope and scope needed in the dictionary.
Thank you.
Check you out, Daryl. Nice.
Thank you, Daryl.
Thank you.
Scope needed. There we go. Let's run this again.
Can we go straight in this page this time? Don't show us your profile. We've seen it.
Well, the reason I go to profile is to make sure that the cache gets filled correctly with the graph.
Oh, okay, fine.
With the graph token before we switch over. So let's go to ToDoList.
Okay. I will accept it.
Okay, click here to sign in. So we're about to get signed in.
And bombed.
These are breakpoints going to get hit here in just a sec. Cool. So good. So we have a scope.
We're in.
There's our scope. That's good. Although I'm not convinced that's is that resource ID going to work? I guess we're going to find out.
I don't think it's going to work.
If we
did you put HTTPS in front of it? Oh, I thought something happened. No, I think the fact that you have HTTPS in front of it just messes things up. Oh, did it come back?
So this I believe this will be the loop.
Yeah.
No, it's still there. So the scope's still there. Okay. So then don't need that. Let's get this out of the way. Back in the browser, so we hit our authorize, and what parameters did we send in on our authorize here? So login, OAuth v2 or OAuth 2 authorize. We've got our client ID, our redirect URI, response type, and here's our resource, HTTPS apps, blah, 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 blah. So there's our resource ID.
Okay.
So then the response from that, So in the response, we had, let's see. Oh, sorry, response. That's what I was looking for.
Something.
I guess what we sent to localhost. So it was a 302. So here's the code, here's the ID token, and here's the state. So we got a code, which was great. So the code, the authorization code, if we were to redeem that authorization code, should be good to go. However, like you said earlier, we're not necessarily redeeming it correctly because we're trying to redeem with the we are redeeming with the other one. So we're with the other scope. So let's go down to our other message down here, to our other action down here, where we're doing a acquire token by authorization code. So let's see, do we have these same properties in our context down here?
I hope so.
It'd be great if we do.
Yeah.
So let's see if we can still get a hold of our properties here.
You need a context something that gives you access to that. Oh yeah, you have context. And so instead of CTX, you need to use context, I think.
You should probably just move these up to be anonymous methods too, but whatever. So at least they're on the same place. So we're not going to be changing this here, of course. What we're going to do
is use that information in this var scope so we can, yeah, it's probably better if you name it, or are you going to leave it as resource for now and then you're going to change it to scope when we go to V2? Is that the plan?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, no, it shouldn't be graph resource ID, is it?
Well, that's what it is by default because that's what we request by default.
Okay.
So here we'll just do the resource. And what we'll do is we will set the resource to...
I see.
We will set the resource to the ToDoList API resource. Get rid of the default, so we don't need the default because we're still in V1, and we'll come back around to that. And it was scope needed. Since we're doing resource ID, I suppose we could probably just do the scope.
Yeah.
So we'll just do scope needed, or just scope. There we go. This isn't confusing at all, but it won't be when we use everything to scopes instead of resources. But
Antonati is asking, I'm pretty much of a noob here, but are the authentication properties signed or something on the way in and out to prevent stuff like people just tampering with the value of needed scope?
Yep, they are.
Oh.
Okay. So on authorization code received, we do not. So we don't have any of that. However, I wonder if we. Well, that's the thing. I wonder if we're even going to have any of this in here.
Oh, because of the time that this gets received, the timing. You think the context will be? Is the context different to the context that we had on the previous Owen call? It's an authorization code received notification context, which I think may be different, right?
I wonder if it's. What we should do is look to see what we have, if we have anything in here. Now, there's also a state parameter. We could put it in state on the round trip, but that'd be kind of lame.
Oh, no. Oh, God. I remember overusing and abusing states in ASP.NET.
So during sign-in, we have authentication response challenge.
Yeah.
Which is OpenID Connect. Properties, it's got a dictionary. It's got redirect and redirect URI. Okay, that's cool. Whatever. Cool. Oh, that's on the redirect anyway. Now, in the authorization code received event, we have no data here. We do have a user.
Oh, claims. Empty.
There's nothing there yet. So we have the principal, but nothing's been done with it yet. So in let's see, in our ON context, we have authentication. Okay. Now, this may be because we haven't. So I'm thinking we need to check. Essentially, we need to check if any of the because I don't know if this will be a challenge, a grant, or a revoke. It may be a grant. Well, no, because we're setting it on a challenge. And this is going to be after the user's already come back.
Yep.
So we've redirected, they've gone out, they've come back, we've gotten an authorization code.
Yes.
What data makes that round trip with it? I wonder. That's what we need to figure out is what's going to go in that. What's going to make that round trip?
This point is fairly late to decide that, I think.
So we'll just be really sort of
defensive programming.
Basically going to ignore because my suspicion is we may actually have those challenge properties
later
when we're already signed in. Because we're going to have to process that authorization code each time.
Yeah.
Oops. Now I don't know if it'll be in that event or not, but we'll go back and look anyway. Okay. So we run this
and see what happens. Okay, I see. Well, I think that's going to be an issue because. Okay, let's see.
We don't need this breakpoint anymore.
Oh.
The provided request must include a scope input parameter. Okay.
I thought we had it there.
Where did we change something?
Yeah, you moved the resource up. Oh, was that space
That's it.
broken?
No, that's the authorization code.
But we didn't change anything
So
up here. That was working before.
is this getting hit and it's not supposed to be?
Let's see. You need to go back.
So we got, so you said authorize. Okay, it all looks okay.
Oh, you need to restart because you had the space on the query on the. I think it's the space that you had on your resource that was causing the issue.
Okay, hang on. This. Oh, it's because I took default off. Interesting. Okay.
Oh.
So, oh no! Come back. Okay.
Come back to me.
So, okay.
You actually complain about the fact that you were missing default. I thought default was only for V2.
Yeah, I'm not sure why it's complaining about that. I
I
don't know
still
just
believe it
yet
was
why it's
the.
complaining
I
about
still
that.
believe it was the space they had in there rather than the actual.
No, there was an error that said it was looking for a scope.
Oh, okay.
Unless maybe I was missing the trailing slash. I suppose that's possible.
Let's find out.
It says it is not a valid scope. Although something's also sending scopes. It's also sending scopes, which is interesting too, because in V1, of course, we used resources. So, all right, signed in.
Okay.
Profile, we got our graph token, to-do
Nice.
list.
Dun,
We
dun,
got
dun,
our
dun,
to-do.
dun. Is it? Yeah. Let's go to here and see what happens. Oh, we're in.
So, no, that's redirect.
Oh, that's the redirect.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's our authorize.
I think we're still in the loop.
So there's our authorize. It's got the resource in here.
So
there are our auth properties. There's our resource. When we come back, we've got
code ID token.
We've got our state still.
Mm-hmm.
So where is our state and on authorization code received? That's what I was looking for. Sorry.
Yeah.
So if I put a breakpoint here, if we go try to do this again, let's go back to localhost.
Yep.
We'll go to the to-do list.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're already signed in.
Yep.
Click here to sign in to get our new token. Okay. So we go over. So now we're back. So our authentication challenge response is null. But what are any of these null? Or all? I guess all of these are null. Why are they all null?
What's in the context? Check the context and see. Like, go all the way to the top and see what we have there. As we got the codes. State.
No, the state is just continue. So
what is in here that we can use?
there it is. It's in our authentication ticket properties.
Ah, see? I think that this context is different to the context that we had before.
Well, that's the ticket because it went with it and came back.
Okay. So what do we need to look into?
Our authentication ticket properties.
Okay.
That's where our authentication properties are. Okay. Oops. Don't want to be an overwrite. All right. So in our ticket properties, let's go get these. oops, sorry, there's our, we got our properties now, so that's great. So we got our properties. Now we should be able to redeem the code successfully, but let's step through it and see what we get.
Do you need to move the breakpoint up to 112?
No, because I don't want to hit it both times.
Okay.
We can add it after we sign in.
Sure.
Oh, that's also not going to be, let's see. So scope needed likely wouldn't have anything in it. Okay, so that's cool. So then the resource is still graph, so that's good. Okay, so that's our normal one. So that's our normal sign in. That's good. Graph worked. To-do list.
You should bail out.
Slow cache check. Click here to sign in.
That is a slow cache check, man. Honestly, what is it doing?
It really is. Okay. So do we have a scope? We do. So we're going to set our resource. Now let's see if we can redeem that. And if not, we have to go check the resource ID.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the resource principal named blah was not found in the tenant. Okay. So
what?
Let's go look.
Is it there on URI? Is it prepending with HTTPS, or did we define it as HTTPS?
That's how we defined it.
Okay.
So let's go to our Azure AD portal. Go to our app.
I don't know how to get there. Let me show you how. Ta-da! See, we came organized this time. We even have emojis.
So let's see. We want to look for
your
what's the name? So that's our to-do list. Our to-do list API resource, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's see. Here it is. Here's our to-do list. Okay. So that is our to-do list resource ID. So let's go find our to-do list. I called these NetFX.
Mm-hmm. API.
So the resource ID is going to be the API. So that may be so. And then let's see, the expose an API. So we've got our scope in here.
Yep.
So here's our application ID URI, which is what we should have.
And because it's V1, we're still using that resource, not the full scope, correct?
Yep. So we don't need. So we have a scope. We have a scope, and the scope is called access. Mm-hmm. We don't actually need that.
For now.
So this is our. So I think I may just. Oh no, that's right. NetFX ancient. So then to-do list service, and then access. We don't need access because it's not the scope. However, I think what I forgot to put in here was a / dot default. So let's go put our dot default in here now. To say, give me everything that I've got from here.
I'm still confused. Does a dot default not only apply to V2 endpoints?
Supposed to.
So, is it because MSAL is trying to be clever and?
That's exactly what it is. It's because we're signing in with V1, but we are using MSAL for token redemption, and MSAL is going through a different path for token redemption.
There you go. Okay.
All right. Profile. Got it.
Yeah.
To-do list.
Oh,
that was much faster this time. Okay. So the resource principal named
net default was not found. Are we looking the right tenant? We must be
Yes.
the right tenant, right?
Yeah, it's the right tenant. Let's go back and look at our web app and make sure that we should have all of our. We've got our API permissions here.
Yeah. We've
granted all the access that we need. We've done admin consent. Granted for this directory for this one, so that's good. So we'll grant that again just to make sure.
Double grant.
The other thing, let's go look at the manifest to make sure we're requesting the correct thing.
Do we need to? You mean it should be a V1 token rather than a V2? Is that what you're saying?
No, the app ID URI that we're going to be using. So there's our identifier URI, which is what we're using to request this token. I'm not entirely sure why it doesn't like that, but so that's our identifier. All that looks okay. I mean, that's what we're going after.
Yep.
So that's our identifier. That should be a valid scope.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing we could always try, of course, is just to do it directly by ID, but I don't really like doing that. But
No.
so we've got our identifier. And if we go back to our settings, make sure this is still correct. Oops, I have an extra thing in here. Get rid of this one. Okay, so that's our resource ID. So that should be fine. And then in our to-do list controller, we're just giving it the to-do list resource ID. The to-do list resource ID is what has come out of that setting, to-do list resource ID.
Mm-hmm.
Wait a minute.
What?
Are these are case sensitive? Are these strings case sensitive? Because this one's lowercase I in the settings and it's capital I elsewhere when it's being used in the code.
But we got it. We could see it in the code, right? It did populate the.
Oh yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah, you're right. Okay.
So it is just weird that we can't see the it doesn't find it a valid resource.
So we're doing.
Is that error message still available, or did you shut down your?
No, it's gone.
All the good old days that you could, or the good new days that you can actually shut down Kestrel and your website is still up there.
Let me make sure I'm not missing.
Characters.
I wonder if I need to put the default on the resource when we request it. That's what I'm wondering now.
Well,
because this is
default.
Because this is MSAL.
Yes.
And MSAL is going to be sending it as a scope. Mm-hmm. So really what we should do is let's do this instead.
Okay.
I'm going to put this down here. I'm going to take default off of this.
Okay.
And then we'll put the scope in here. This will append default, and that way we don't have it in any of our configuration settings or any of that silliness.
Yes, but I feel that you're going to. I think it's going to fail with your sign in. Check it out. Will it work?
Shouldn't fail.
Okay.
So we're signed in.
Yep.
Got our profile. Got our to-do list.
Normal slow cast, like it.
Okay, so we've got our sign in. We've got our scope. We're gonna.
Append
I need to take this off of here because now we're gonna have default twice. So that's not gonna work out very well because now we're gonna have .default.
Change it. You can change it. Change the value.
What do you mean I can change it? Where?
Yeah, just right click. There you go. You can actually edit that. Enter.
You're kidding me.
Nope.
Whew. Dangerous. All right. Let's see what we got.
Living dangerously. Let's see what happened. Oh, you're still.
Well, it didn't accept. So that's good. We did not have an exception. Oh, we do have an exception now. Okay, so what was the exception that we caught? Oh, we're not catching one. We're just catching exceptions. So that's good though. Let's see what our exception is this time around.
Making progress, one exception at a time. Exception-driven development, EDD.
So AZ Wildfire, I see your question.
The ID? Or is there a new question? did I miss?
No, he's saying, why don't you just put proxies in front of everything? Well, I think the only problem with that approach is that now you've got a proxy, so you've got something else you have to keep running. Secondly, you have what if I need to get authorization data in here, right?
Yep.
How do I get authorization data in my code? Or am I just saying I'm going to publish all my code, hope and pray that the front end or the proxy that you're referring to is going to take care of everything for us, right?
Zero trust, all the things. Yeah. Python. Zero trust is great, but you still need to configure and write some code to get there.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of let's put proxies in front of everything. I have I'm just not a super big fan of it.
What's the exception?
Oh, couldn't connect to the remote server because we don't have the other server running, so we're in good shape now.
Yes. So we got
So
a
that
token.
looks like we got a token. I'll put a breakpoint here.
Network, in the network pane, we should be able to see the access token, correct?
No, because the browser isn't making the server call. The server is making the call. But that's okay. Let's do this. I'm going to put a breakpoint here.
Yep.
Actually, I'll put one here, and we'll see if MSAL gets it for us.
We haven't lost the graph resource ID. The graph resource ID is acquired the first time we sign in, but when we go to call the API, we need to change from graph resource ID to the new scope. We got a token. Yes, BSD guy, you got it.
Yep, so we got a token. So JWTMS, let's go look at this token, which our API should be good for. And there's our audience.
STS,
so
which is the V1 for the issue.
So our audience, this is the correct audience. This is our API that we've yet to configure. And then, it's an Azure AD token. So everything about it's good. Of course, it has me and who I am in it and all that sort of stuff. So that's good. So we got it. Now, the difference here is, and this is sort of to answer your question, Daryl, when we, I'm going to take these breakpoints out of here.
Hey,
so
before you continue, do you want to do a git commit for this one, and then we can do git branch and then move to the V2 endpoint?
This isn't even in Git yet, but sure. So to answer your question, Daryl, when we first sign in, when we're doing the initial sign in, that initial sign-in is using the graph. So the initial sign-in, we're signing the user in, and we're getting an authorization code for graph, and then we're redeeming that authorization code for a token, and it's getting put into the cache. Mm-hmm. The next time when we go to that ToDoList browser, the ToDoList browser needs a token for a different resource or for a different scope. And since it's not the same resource, it's not graph, it's not in the cache. So we're just saying, hey, go sign in again. And we're going to also add that one to the cache. So the first time we go, we don't have a token for that resource, but the graph one is still there. The second time it's additive. So we're adding a second token to the cache, and then we go get both of them out of the cache directly instead of having to go back through a second sign in. So you're not losing your graph token. You're just not using it for that specific round trip. So I promised that we'd look at B2C before the end of the day. So with B2C, we have to make a couple of changes, mostly to authorities and clients. I know it's a little bit later than I had said we would do this, but let's.
V2?
I'll do a new branch for we'll call this B2C.
Oh, you're doing the B2C now? You do realize that we have a hard stop at 10, right?
Well, we promised people we would do B2C, so that's why I figure we'll do that first.
And your promises staying true.
Yeah. It beats the other stuff I have to work on today, so I don't mind it too much. Okay, so let's get to B2C. We're going to speed run B2C a little bit today. So let's get to B2C. We got to register an app, and we'll call this NetFX Ancient B2C, and we'll put web at the end so we remember. All that's cool, whatever. It's localhost 44322, I think, right, Christos?
That's the one.
So get that in here. Come on. We'll get we got our client ID. So let's put our client ID in here. We'll need to go get a client secret. So we go create a secret, new secret, delete me, 6 months. Yeah. Okay.
I like how you can now define it for 3 months as well if you want to. Did you know there's a Graph API that you can actually run to see all the expired or the expiring secrets?
Yep.
Maybe we should do that. Maybe we should do that once on the stream. I help people with.
So we're going to use TFP, which is Trust Framework Policy. We're going to use then it's going to be my tenant name.
Yep.
Then it's going to be, I believe. Sign-up policy. Let's use one. We'll use Susie Rec, I think, is the one that I've got.
You might want to do BTC lowercase because I know that MSAL is sometimes temperamental with the BTC, the policy name.
Well, luckily this is before MSAL, so we're not gonna. Okay, so then so graph is going to be interesting because graph we can't access.
Correct.
So
you need to change the goal there.
So instead, what we're going to do is let's switch it to
the resource API for the resource for our API, more or less.
Yeah, pretty much. All right. So we've got API permissions.
Mm-hmm. Do you have an API handy? Because it doesn't really matter, right? We're not.
Okay. So we'll do a quick API. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to run an API. We're just going to see if we can get a token for it.
This is a speed run, friends. 14 minutes.
So let's set this. We'll call this NetFX Ancient API. Okay, so that's our application ID. We'll just call this access, even though we're not going to use it.
Yep.
So we've got our application ID URI. We're gonna put that in for graph resource ID, just even though it's not graph, because I don't feel like because then we don't have to go blow up the code to make it work. So graph resource ID is that. We got a secret. We got our tenant. We got our client ID. We've got our graph resource, which is really just our resource for our first call. We've got our policy in here. I think we're okay. The other thing we need to do is go back to our web app and add that API as a required permission and consent to it. That's a step that seems to get lost quite a bit. That's fine. Add permission. We're going to grant admin consent for this so it doesn't explode. And cool. All right. Let's see what we get. I have very little confidence. All right, so we're signed out. So we've cleared all of our cookies and sessions and all sorts of silliness that we've got. Cool. So let's do I'm going to go ahead and open up our network window. Let's do a sign in. Okay, that's a good start. So, we didn't configure it for implicit. Of course, I forget that all the time, right?
Yes.
Good though, because we did make it all the way to B2C. So let's go back to our we'll go back to our authentication. We're going to enable implicit for ID tokens, not for access tokens, because although we may be back, you never know. So let's go back to localhost 44322. We're going to sign in. Oh, it hasn't. Well, I guess it hasn't persisted yet. Did I save it? Yeah, okay, I hit save. Did it say it saved? Okay. This is for the web app. Okay. Unauthorized client. Still not configured to allow OAuth implicit.
Do you not save it?
Well, I did save it, but OAuth implicit implies access tokens too. I'm going to check it for the moment, and I hope that's not what it is, but sadly, I think it is going to be. Even though we do have a code and we do have a secret, but that's just sort of the subtlety of B2C, I suppose. Okay, we'll sign in.
Okay.
If I can type today, tab order
Hunter 2.
still wrong.
Hunter 2, right?
Signed in.
Oh, we're in.
Okay, I mean, I'm signed in. Now, we have to do some claim mappings, but I am signed in.
Damn, man, we're in.
Now, if I was to go to profile, so there is no tenant ID, yeah, so that's one problem that's going to be there. So there is no tenant ID. The graph resource ID, remember, that's not our actual graph resource ID, so that's a little bit different.
And that should be access, right? If you're doing
well, no, it's oh yeah, I guess you're right, yeah, because it's v2.
Yeah.
So, although .default would still work, that would be fine.
Yeah, you're right.
Let me take. Let's take. Since we're not actually going to call the graph because we can't.
Wait. Have you checked in the previous code?
It's a different branch.
Oh yeah,
it's a different branch.
Nice. Okay, change the head. I give you permission. When you say claims mapping, is that something you configure in the middleware or somewhere else?
Yeah, you do it. Yeah, you do it in the middleware. Or yeah, you could always reference specific claims. But yeah, you can do a mapping in the. You can do a mapping in the middleware.
But you can also change it in the policy, right? The custom policy, in the custom policy, if you wanted to.
Yeah, you could also. Yeah, that's right. You could also change your output stuff that comes out too. I don't need this tenant ID, so I'll just put like empty string because who cares, right? Because we're not actually going to make this call. I just want to see if we're going to get a token or not. Okay.
Environment.string.empty. It's environment.string.empty, I think, the value for empty string. Although two quotes work.
Let's go to profile. So my UPN is also still out there. Let me just see what claims are in here. Probably preferred username, maybe, or
Antonati is using ROPC. Antonati, that's almost a cause for banning. I'm just kidding. ROPC and custom policies, and sometimes we get one value for the email address, and sometimes it's in a different claim. So I'm wondering if there's a cleaner way rather than just checking both the possible claim names. Yeah. I see what you're saying. You still do it in the middleware.
I don't really want emails, but that's probably the one we're going to have to use for the moment is emails, which the email value. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's cool. Okay. So the type is emails. It's easy enough. So let's just change this to
emails.
Now this is using an out of the box user flow. So if you're using it, like I said, that's why. So these are standard names for that.
Yep.
If you're using something else, it's going to be a little bit different. Okay. We got 7 minutes. So profile, we've got an object ID. That's good. Let's go try to get a token. We don't have one because I didn't sign out and sign back in. That would be why. Hold, please.
Hold the phone.
All right, we'll sign in. Our token should be in the cache after sign in by virtue of the fact that we're doing that when we start. So acquire token silent. Our UPN is our email, whatever. Okay, so we're still getting an exception. You're trying to acquire a token silently using a login hint. No account was found in the token cache having this hint. So yeah, so I don't have the right kind of a hint.
Yeah.
So we need to figure out what hint to use.
The UPN doesn't work?
There is no UPN in B2C. I mean, there is in a roundabout way.
Something as a random value. Maybe what's in the claims that we can use as a hint? You know, you can change the authority to be B2C, right? With B2C authority, I think. That's fine. Don't worry about it.
What are you talking about?
It's okay. In the MSAL builder, but ignore me.
What was I thinking about? Now I've forgotten.
Hint. What should we use for hint?
Oh, right. So when we redeem our code, we've redeemed the code. Probably the other thing to look at here. So let's look at get. I'm gonna actually cheat for a minute. Let's just look at the accounts. Get accounts async, and then we'll just come and look to see. What would be really nice would be to append the user's home ID here.
Okay.
To the claim set, but sadly, I don't know if we'll be able to because I don't think we. Well, actually, now that I think about it, in our authentication ticket in the identity, we should be able to add a claim, and if we can add a claim at this point, we could do the accounts first home account ID. Oops. Home. Oops. Home account. Well, we could just add it as a claim to the claim set. Then we can go get that. So we'll do a new claim. We'll call it home account ID, and we'll go and get this with the identifier. But let's run it and see.
You're missing a closing bracket.
Oh, here. All right.
Closing parentheses, I should have said.
4 minutes. Oh,
4 minutes.
This is terrible. I don't know if it's going to work.
Well, you're not using the that anywhere. That home ID claim.
Not yet, but I will be soon enough.
Oh, you
if
want
it's
to take it?
if it's actually available and it actually writes it into the principal, then
I see.
We'll definitely use it, and that's what we'll use from here on.
Oh, okay, I get you now.
That would be simpler anyway than all of the silliness we're doing today. All right, So now we're going to look in the MSAL cache. What accounts are in the cache? We have one. Username doesn't exist, but that's fine, whatever. So then we have the home account ID, and the identifier is the user ID dash flow dot
tenant
object ID.
Oh.
So now we should be able to add that claim and have it be persisted. So what we'll do, I'm going to let it run.
Yep.
We're going to go to the profile thing, and we'll just see if that claim actually got persisted all the way in claims principal.current. And home account ID. There we go. We've got it. So let's go get our home account ID. Home account ID. We got that. Take this. Run it again.
So I'm hacking over here. If you are looking at this code, please make sure that you change the parameter names or the variables to make more sense to you.
All right, we're going to sign in.
Dun, dun, dun. Anticipation.
So we got our user object ID. Does our UPN have a value? It does.
Yes.
And
what?
Oh, I can. Hang on. I'll tell you why. Hang on.
What did you do?
Let me just clear this cache before we do it. So I'm not using a login hint. This is not a login hint. This is wait MSAL get account async and then the UPN. Identifier. Even though it's not the UPN.
Yeah.
Because it's not a login hint. It's not a login hint. It's a full blown identifier.
Oh,
so
really?
That's fine. Yep.
So even in non-BTC, like in Azure AD, it wasn't the hint, it was the identifier?
Well, no, we were using UPN in regular Azure AD.
Okay.
Since we don't really have a UPN here, that's part of our problem.
Okay.
Looks like we got a token, so that's good. Result. Access token is null, however. Which is interesting. So we're going to have to chase that one down. But, let's see. Yeah, so the access token is null. I wonder if that's because we have our... we don't have the right scope in here.
Oh, yeah. Access.
That could be why. Imagine that. Do we have the whole thing in there? No.
Nope.
So we want the access scope. Cool. Cool. All right, last time, then we got a bolt because we got
Yep.
we got a dip.
My
All right.
girlfriend says I never get her hints. I don't know how to debug my issue. It's because you're not using the object identifier, you're just using hints.
Oh man, who came up with that joke?
Hey, I am doing my best. I know that stand-up comedy is not a career path I should be choosing as a first choice. Do we get the
There we
scope?
go.
Oh
We got-
snap! At
we
the
got
nick of
next.
time. That was a speed run. 17 minutes to convert it to BTC.
There we go. There's our issuer.
Nice.
There's our audience, which is web APIs. So okay, hey, we'll publish this up on the 425 show.
GitHub repo.
On the 425 show Getter today. When we do that, we will post that in Discord. So make sure you join Discord, and we will when we get this published up later today, we'll let everybody know. Thanks for hanging out with us. We're going to be on the next show on this channel anyway, but only for like 2 minutes. But stick around for developer. We're going to raid. I guess we should. I don't know how that's going to work. It doesn't really matter because we got to go anyway.
Sal codes. Clark.io.
Well, okay. So we'll go raid shell codes.
Shell codes.
Because if you guys don't want to see us again anyway, so let's get out of here. Hey, everybody, thanks for hanging with us. We'll be back on Tuesday. We're going to do more of this, but with APIs, and we're going to look at logic apps and managed identities and assigning rights and doing all sorts of fun stuff. So hope you all have a great weekend. Join us on Discord. Come and hang out with us, and we'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week.
Thanks, see you, everybody.
Everyone. Bye.
Bye.